Today on Lacurrents, Gary Cooper is one of the most beloved American screen actors of the 20th century. Thanks to his daughter, Maria Cooper Janis, his legacy lives on, not just as memorabilia, but as a support system for indigenous artists. Next, when it comes to potential natural disasters in Los Angeles, we often think of earthquakes and fires. Our coastal areas also need to stay vigilant about tsunamis. We discuss how you can be prepared. But to start, as COVID continues to play a large role in our daily lives, we sit down with two of the city's leading medical experts, Dr. Laura Kokinda and Joanne O'Brien, to discuss how to deal with the process of reopening. Well, the last 2 years have been filled with questions, concerns, adjustments, but fortunately, we've learned a lot as well. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Dr. Laura Kokinda, psychologist, and Joanne O'Brien, Medical Services Administration from LA Emergency Management. You guys have just been such a solid source for great information for the last couple of years, and I'm delighted to have you both here today.
Thanks for having us. Good to be back.
We keep hearing about these variants that are more transmissible, more transmissible, more transmissible. It's almost as each one has been, Delta to Omicron to now this one is entitled what again?
BA2.
BA2. What does that mean exactly?
If I'm standing next to you and you happen to be infected, and when you exhale, it's kind of airborne, it's in the droplets of your saliva, and I breathe it in, it takes less of that virus to make you ill. So it just hooks on, and once it gets into your system, it can duplicate a whole lot faster.
Okay, but with the vaccines, et cetera, the body's capacity to stop you from getting critically ill has been impacted in a good way.
Absolutely, we know that to be true. If you're vaccinated, you're almost 100% not going to be in the hospital or get a really severe illness.
Okay, all right. Dr. Kokinda, we've talked a lot about the mental things that have happened. What have you seen over the course of changing into this new, more open world? What kind of mental concerns should we be aware of?
It's very similar to what we were seeing before. It's just more change. A lot of us finally got comfortable, even with things we didn't like, just being aware of the dangers, wearing our mask, doing those things. And now suddenly people aren't wearing masks, you can go places, and as much as we've waited for that, it's a new change, and old habits die hard.
What are some of the things that you should be aware of that just add to the stress that we already have?
Watching the news, of course, and be informed, but limit it. Social media is another one. You want to be mindful of what you're taking in from your social media. A lot of people are gravitating to individuals who only think the way they do, which triggers a certain emotional response in us, and we're losing touch that people are people. We want to try to stay connected with everyone. And then the other thing is we really want to avoid drugs and alcohol. You can have maybe the glass happy hour, but we don't want to be using it for coping, because that takes us down a very unhealthy path. We've seen all different kinds of unhealthy coping, a lot of substance use and a lot of unhealthy eating, which has consequently triggered unhealthy medical conditions, and now we need to be aware of what we've been doing.
Okay, so let's go back to this whole thing. Now we're into this transition thing, and everybody's kind of feeling their way back into it. How about shaking hands?
Dr. Fauci said he hopes that never comes back.
But it's coming back.
Yeah, and he said, because gosh, it helped with the flu, the influenza. And even if it is coming back, you're right, people, when we go out, but you still sort of should wash your hands, maybe not in front of them, like, I'll be back, but it's probably not a good idea still. We still have it out there. It's really not sort of in terms of hygiene. You should always wash your hands after you've touched somebody else's hands, just generally speaking. So
now everybody has their different modalities, everybody has their different comfort levels, and now everybody is handling it differently. So how should we handle something if somebody extends their hand and I don't want to touch them, or how can we walk this compassion line when it comes to people's comfort level with whatever it is that we are currently handling when it comes to this virus?
Well, one thing, we all need to recognize everyone's at a different comfort level. We can't make assumptions, because those will get us into trouble. But if someone does extend a hand or something else you're not comfortable with, let them know. You don't have to aggressively let them know. You can make a joke like, oh, I'm not there yet, you know, or anything along those lines to kind of diffuse that situation. Give them a heads up what your comfort level is, and then hopefully they receive appropriately.
Have we become better communicators, do you think, during this? Are you noticing that people are more willing to express themselves in terms of how they're feeling versus prior to the pandemic?
You know, that's a great question. I think in certain ways, yes. A lot of people are very expressive about their feelings and thoughts and opinions. I think something, though, is we need to make sure that that crosses groups. So it's not just with those who we feel share the same thoughts and opinions and feelings. We want to be able to communicate to people who might feel or think differently as well.
There are some odd things I don't think any of us anticipated stepping back into the world. It's like, oh, this crowd's too big for me. Or, oh, why don't they have their masks on? Or, oh, where am I going to sit at the restaurant? You know, there's lots of this that we'd not even considered in our hopes that we would just be past it all. So how do we handle that personally? How do we, you know, not only are we helping others, but how do we help ourselves?
Cut yourself some slack. You're not going to know how you feel in certain situations until you experience them. We might think we know, and we could very possibly be right in our predictions, but we may not, and that's okay. If you go somewhere and you recognize, I don't feel safe, or this doesn't feel right for me, pay attention to that instinct and go ahead and go home. Go leave a little early, communicate what you need to, and just communicate to your friends, family, they'll understand.
How are we doing with the efficacy of the tests? Are we feeling confident in the results? Because, you know, for a while there it was, you know, there is a false positive and a false negative. I mean, but now we all have that available to us to be able to, as you mentioned, have them in your home. So how are we feeling about the tests
The
themselves?
thing about the tests, that even a lot of people are doing the tests at home, so we really don't know the positivity rate right now because people aren't that sick. They might get a positive at home. This latest one, the BA2, is called the stealth for a reason. It hides, and so the test may not pick it up. So a lot of the providers in the community, if you sort of match all the symptoms of COVID, even if that PCR is negative, they're going to treat you like you have COVID, or, you know, send you at home to isolate, stay away from people.
People who have gotten ill, their long-term effects have been pretty varied and pretty dramatic. What are we seeing?
We're seeing a lot of what they call long haulers, is where people are having cognitive, or they're not able to think as clear, foggy brain. They've had lung damage, heart damage. They are fatigued all the time. So we're really still learning. You know, and what it sort of tripped was this autoimmune response, where your body sort of, all the soldiers came out and kind of started attacking what they thought was the virus, but really having the effects on your major organs. So we really are still working through that, and I think a lot of people, their health will be changed like forever. You know, they won't ever be 100%.
So they're taking that seriously, because I know for a while there was the question of whether that was actually legitimately a physical change in your body, or whether that was just a psychological.
No, it's real. You know, the tests for your heart and your lungs are showing actual damage. So, yeah.
It's a vicious thing. Bad information propagates faster than right information. So what's the best source for the correct information? You know, can we trust the CDC? Can we trust, you know, all of these?
You can.
Okay.
Yeah, you go to the CDC, your public health department. They've done, I think, a remarkable job of keeping data updated. One of my favorite sites is Johns Hopkins University. They have tracked this data internationally from day one. And on Fridays, they have the actual doctors doing the research that give an update. It's just great, you know, and they have slides. And just go to that site and you can kind of get a sense of what's going on everywhere. It's good.
But okay, so Johns Hopkins and
CDC, the local health departments, LA County site is really informative. It's very good.
Okay, and you both are incredibly informative, and thank you both very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The USC School of Cinematic Arts is currently hosting a curated collection of Gary Cooper's memorabilia at their campus. I sat down with Maria Cooper Janis to talk about how she continues to honor her father's legacy by helping others. Your life has been extremely rich in so many different ways, but I know that it really also kind of came to light when you were a very young girl and you traveled with your parents and you got to see everything he did. Were you aware of how important your father was and what he was doing when you were a young woman?
You know, I think starting out very, very early, my parents, both of them, they were very smart. They said, look, everything that you'll see happening around us and to us, it has to do with your father's career, with his work, and it's got nothing to do with you. So don't go thinking, you know, whatever. But it was wonderful because my father, he really loved people, you know, he enjoyed the interaction.
Well, you two have a lot in common in the fact that you went to Chouinard. So you were an artist as well. So did you ever share art stories together, or did you look at his work? And
Oh yeah. I saw. Well, in fact, I think you have it on exhibition here. I found in his old school books, which I have, he did a term paper on the history of Yellowstone Park, and it is illustrated. So I believe in this exhibition. Here at USC, there is that term paper with wonderful drawings of not only the mountains and the trees, but the little waterfalls and flying eagles. You know, because there's sort of all. He loved nature. He really absorbed everything.
Well, you've devoted an enormous amount of, you know, your passion and love and energy towards maintaining this legacy of this man that you know and love so dearly. I mean, what is it that you see that is valuable for something that should last for a very long time?
I think probably the answer to that is best summed up in something that he said himself when he was asked, what makes you choose the roles that you play? And he very simply said, I want to try to portray the best a man can be. And that whether it was a real-life hero like Alvin York, or Lou Gehrig, part of the Yankees, and or then the fictional characters. That was always the goal behind what made him do what he did, and working through his problems and coming out the best. It's very, very significant.
And these roles had an impact on his life too. I know that he was a little hesitant to portray, you know, Gehrig, but he learned and absorbed and a beautiful performance that was incredibly important and moving. And then when he toured to soldiers overseas, that he drew upon that.
Well, he drew upon that, and he was very, very nervous and upset about, what am I going to do on a USO tour? You know, I'm not Bob Hope. I don't tell jokes. I'm not Betty Grable. I don't look sexy, and you know, what can I give the guys? And one of the generals said to him, Coop, the guys want to hear the Lou Gehrig speech. And there's a wonderful photograph. I don't know if you have it in this exhibition or not, but there's a beautiful photograph of him standing on the stage, delivering the speech to 1,000 men and women who, you know, and who knows which of those 1,000 soldiers were going to come back alive the next week. So it was a very, very, very powerful moment. The other character that he felt really intimidated by was portraying Alvin York.
Oh, yes.
And he really tried not to do it. But when the word came down that apparently Alvin York said,
no one but him.
No one but Gary Cooper, he went and he met with Alvin York, and they got along, and I think there's actually the uniform my father wore.
So here we are, and I did ask Annette before we were, because we are in a school environment, so we're the benefit of,
benefits of young
of
voices.
young
That's
voices
wonderful. That's
floating in
wonderful.
on occasion. But is there something in here that you just cannot get enough of, that you love seeing again and again and again?
As you may know, we just arrived when when I sat down. So this is the only area that I've seen so far.
Must be delightful.
But it's thrilling. It really is. I mean, to know, number one, that the archives will be protected in perpetuity, and I think, for me, it's somehow it's the difference between reading an email from someone and reading a handwritten letter from the same person. There's something tangible and intangible about the real thing, and I think, I mean, it excites me to see my father's saddle.
What prompted the choice of the USC School of Cinematic Arts for all of this?
Well, I investigated possible other places to place my father's archives, and when I came here, something just rang a bell that said yes. It was the creativity, the dynamics, the opportunity to grow at the leading edge of the industry and at the leading edge of technology.
You've mentioned earlier about, Montana, growing up and loving the environment and the people who lived in the environment, and you've taken that even a step further in order to create a foundation that supports indigenous peoples. How did you come to that decision?
Well, I kind of felt I had no other way to go, because I know, and from lots of conversations at home, how deeply, deeply disturbed my father always was at how our country treated the American Indian. Very, very often when I'd go into my father's room, if he was reading, he would say he was going in to study the script for the next day, but in fact he was reading a book on American Indians.
Oh, interesting.
And history and all that. So I just thought that, for Native Americans and indigenous people also, to be able to get an education at an institution like this, where all their creative talents can be drawn on, be it, writing, storytelling, imagination, directing. I just thought this would be the most appropriate opportunity, honoring my father, to be able to give an underserved group of young people a chance to really shine.
Thank you. Thank you for doing this. Thank you for spending this time.
My pleasure, really.
Thank you for supporting young filmmakers. And thank you for making sure that your father's story continues to be told.
Well, I hope it is. I hope it continues to be told, and I hope he continues to be an inspiration to people. I get quite a few letters, and it's wonderful when something gets exposure, like I hope this will, or even when his films are shown on TCM, I get a rash of letters. So many of them say, your father was my idol, your father sort of set the stage for how I wanted to behave. I think it was Sam Goldwyn who gave my father a piece of good advice early on in his career. He was considering doing some movie, and the part he was offered, Goldwyn didn't like. And he said to my father, never let your public down. They expect something of you.
Sage advice.
Thank you.
Yeah. LA's coastal communities have long been warned about the potential for a tsunami. I chatted with representatives from the City of LA's Emergency Management Department and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration about how you can get prepared. Living in Southern California, we're used to hearing that we need to prepare for all kinds of things, earthquakes, fires, landslides, etc. But there's one area that we also should take into consideration, the possibility of a tsunami. I'm delighted to be joined today by Jessica Kellogg. She's the Public Information Officer for the Los Angeles Emergency Management Department. So nice to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
You guys cover a wide range of different things, but there are plans in place within the Emergency Management Department in the case of a tsunami. So what happens in your vantage point?
So from our vantage point, we have a duty officer who constantly maintains watch while the Emergency Operations Center is not activated, and he's in touch with multiple parties, the County of Los Angeles, the National Weather Service, and they relay information to the duty officer based on a pending tsunami event.
All right, so as we were saying, and we've said this a couple times now, we're sort of aware that we need to kind of have an earthquake kit in our car, and we're sort of aware that we need to have these plans in place, to gather our family, etc. But what about people who want to just understand what they should have that might be different or might be exactly the same with a tsunami? Where's the, there's information, I'm sure, available, and I'm sure it comes through the city.
Yes. So through Ready Your LA Neighborhood, we have a program that will introduce you to general preparedness tips on how to prepare for any event, because preparation is pretty universal. Imagine that you did receive an evacuation alert for a fire or a tsunami, then what you would take with you to a shelter or to your place of stay in the interim would be the same. So having your toiletries available, food for additional days, water for yourself, your family, and your dog, your pets, having that communication plan in place, extra chargers, personal documents, maybe on a zip file or copies of those documents that can be packed up into a backpack. Whatever you think that you would need and wouldn't be able to retrieve immediately following a disaster is what you should take with you.
Now that's Rylan?
Yes.
Okay, and Rylan stands for?
Ready Your LA Neighborhood.
Now, Rylan is an app and a website?
Well, we are developing an app,
awesome.
But that's not online yet. It is a website, so you can visit readyla.org, and we also work within homes for preparedness, but it is about connecting communities, so connecting neighborhoods and neighbors together so that they would all be able to respond to a disaster by helping each other out.
We worked together quite a bit through this whole pandemic experience. It seems to me that what we have in place here in Los Angeles is pretty sophisticated in regards to its ability to respond and its ability to coordinate and its outreach to the community.
We are a very robust department, and being in the city of Los Angeles, we're blessed with a lot of resources. A lot of neighboring jurisdictions would say that we are resource rich, but we take that with pride because we are always willing to share our resources and extend our subject matter expertise, as well as embrace the outside knowledge and the external help that's provided by our partners.
Okay, so if people want to get more information,
visit tsunamizone.org.
All right, that's very straightforward. All right, Jessica, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, stay tuned. We have more information on exactly what a tsunami is and how it might affect Southern California. The science of tsunamis is actually very, very fascinating. I'm delighted to be joined now by Eric Bolt. He is a warning coordination meteorologist with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, aka NOAA. So nice to have you here.
Glad to be here.
Getting into it is fascinating in terms of what a tsunami is and everything, but I want to begin here specifically with Los Angeles. I think we all know that earthquakes are normally what we understand to generate tsunamis, but there are other factors at play, are there not?
Yeah, earthquakes are the main reason for generating tsunamis, but we recently had a volcano that exploded, and that caused a tsunami. So it was kind of a seat of the pants type moment where we had to think about how severe could this be, and it turned out to be very accurately forecasted. So that's one of them, and also landslides. If you think about these tall cliffs that we have off some of our coasts, if that would slump into the ocean, that could cause a local tsunami, maybe the worst case scenario, because we wouldn't have any warning for that type of event.
Can a man-made event cause a tsunami?
Back in the 50s and 60s, I think we had, or 40s, we had nuclear testing.
Yeah.
And we did a lot of bombs out in the Pacific Ocean. Didn't really cause any significant type of tsunami. So I think we're safe from a man-made caused.
There are, I don't want to call them threats, but there are events that could take place in other parts of the world that would affect the California coastline. I think we've all kind of understood that Alaska has an effect. We heard one from the Japanese earthquake.
Right. It's the Ring of Fire.
Okay,
it's
so what is that?
Pacific Ring of Fire. That's where all the volcanoes and earthquake plates are rubbing together. It's a big ring around the entire Pacific Ocean. So over by Chile, we've had some really big tsunamis originate from that area of South America. It takes about 12 to 13 hours to reach us once that occurs. Japan takes about 10 hours to get here. Alaska, about 5 hours. The Cascadia subduction zone off the coast of Oregon and Washington, it's very similar size to Sumatra, if you remember that event back in 2004. If that one went off on a major earthquake, we'd only have about 2 hours to get out of the way.
Wow. And how do we know these are coming? I mean, Jessica mentioned, that there is the National Tsunami Warning Center, but are there warning centers all over the place, and how does the warning apparatus work?
So there's 2 warning centers, and there can be some confusion. One is called the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center, and that is only for Pacific Islands and international waters. It's not for the West Coast.
Oh, okay.
The one we want to pay attention to is called the National Tsunami Warning Center, and it's located in Palmer, Alaska. They were implemented in 1964 after the major earthquake in 1964, and that was a very damaging tsunami to California, one of the worst ones on record. So our earthquake warnings come from that center. It is housed by seismologists mainly, and they're looking at all the earthquake activity. Once an earthquake happens, they immediately evaluate how strong it was, how deep it was, how long it lasted, and what the impact could be for generating a tsunami. Then they'll put out a warning, the worst case scenario.
There's no way you can answer this question, but now you're making me want to go home and see what happens to the ocean life in a tsunami and how they respond.
If you're out on a boat in the middle of the ocean and a tsunami is going by you, you wouldn't even notice it.
Oh.
It would be like a little wave, just a little rise, just a brief little up and down, and that would be it.
So it's really only until it hits land.
As that big wave with this very long period arrives, it kind of slows down and it picks up more momentum and grows in height because it's piling water behind it. And as it's hitting the friction of the shoreline, it starts to grow higher and higher and then moves in, kind of like for Southern California, more like a major tide. It's like a tide is rolling in all of a sudden. And that's why we have really strong currents and damage to our harbors and our marinas. The port of Los Angeles gets struck by these. So that's where most of the damage happens. And if it's enough momentum of water, then it could inundate the shoreline and move inland.
Okay, we've talked about preparation, but what if people are just interested in the science of tsunamis?
So there's one main website to go to, and it's very easy to remember. It's tsunami.gov. You can see both educational information and also what's currently issued for any type of tsunami for California.
All right. Well, Eric, I want to talk to you about a lot of weather things at some point in time, so promise to come back.
I will.
Okay, thanks so much. And that's a wrap on this LA Currents.